It is the NFL draft, and with the second pick, the Houston Texans have selected Ohio State's CJ Stroud, and then they traded up immediately the third pick with Arizona and secured Will Anderson from Arizona. We will bring in Locked On Texans host, John Hickman. But first, our Locked On NFL draft coverage is presented by Ultimate Football GM. You think you can run an NFL franchise? Visit ultimate-gm.com to play the ultimate NFL GM simulation game. Start your NFL dynasty today. Sounds fun, right? Not as fun as what we're talking about today. John, it was crazy. We were freaking out, probably not as much as you were. Walk me through kind of the emotions from the Texans side, the fandom of everything that went down. Take me through how everyone's feeling.
Yeah, so for the fan base, it was Will Levis, it was Anthony Richardson, it was Trey Back, it was Will Anderson, it was Tyree Wilson. There was no way they were going to draft CJ Stroud because of the agent, right? All of these smoke screens were popping up left to right, and you know what I thought to myself? Shout out to my co-host Cody Davis, who also covers the Houston Texans with me on the Locked On Texans podcast. These are a lot of smoke screens. And for a smart man like myself, I thought to myself, well, throughout the entire offseason, between Nick Caserio, Houston Texans general manager, between the new hire head coach DeMeco Ryans, they have said constantly that they have flexibility and optionality to maneuver themselves throughout the draft. Houston has 2 first-round picks for next year. Houston came into this draft with 12 overall picks throughout the entire 7 rounds. And then I got to thinking, if we're hearing that there's a split on both of these guys, it makes sense for Houston to trade up. And that's exactly what they did, going to get CJ Stroud with the number 2 overall pick, securing what seems to be their next franchise quarterback. And then for a defense that would be coached by DeMeco Ryans throughout the entire offseason, we've heard him say from the start of the press conferences, he wants a swarm defense. He wants the relentlessness. And when we look at what the Houston Texans did throughout the offseason in the free agency period, they addressed the safety position. They addressed the linebacker position. They addressed the interior defensive line position. One position that was not addressed was the edge position. And right now with John Gennard and Jerry Hughes, who's going to be 36 when the season starts, there was no way that this team was going to leave out of this draft without addressing a serious need. They just so happened to be able to do so by trading up with Arizona and getting possibly the best edge defender in the draft, Alabama's own Will Anderson, who also is from our new head coach, alma mater. So the excitement in the city of Houston right now is electric. Like I'm fighting a virus, so I'm at home, but I know everybody at the Miller Outdoor Theater is going crazy. The fan base was torn apart throughout the entire process, but this is what the Houston Texans knew that they had to get done. The amount of draft picks that they traded, the 33 overall pick in this year's draft, the first rounder for next year, and a third rounder for this year. They got back the third, which landed Will Anderson at 105. Those picks for next year don't matter. This year matter because this roster that they put together throughout the free agency period is good enough right now to compete in the AFC South.
You mentioned CJ Stroud being a franchise quarterback. I'm curious your thoughts on his ability to be that guy for a number of reasons. He had this amazing surrounding cast at Ohio State. When he comes to the Texans, will he have that? Does he have that? How much of his success was due to what he had in college?
That's a great question. And I've been talking about that on our podcast. What top quarterback coming out doesn't have weapons around him in college? Like Joe Burrow, who I believe is a top 2-3 quarterback in the league right now. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson, when healthy, he played with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Terrence Marshall. And Randy Moss's son, Thaddeus Moss, was a good tight end for that team. And I believe Clyde Edwards-Helaire was on that team. So they also had a lot of weapons. We look at a lot of these top quarterbacks like Sunshine. They have weapons. Coming in right now, Houston does not have top-tier weapons and playmakers on the receiver side of the ball. John Mechie, who's been back in practice, battled cancer. He's healthier now. So we expect for him to be a big piece in this year's offense. But he's essentially a rookie. You got third-year Nico Collins. They still have to address that wide receiver position, and I think that they will do so in the third round. So I'm not doubting that. And this year's draft class has some talented wide receivers in it. Maybe not number ones after you get past JSN, but they got some guys that can make some plays for your team, putting them in the right situation. So when I look at that argument and say, well, it's due to the system, it's due to the playmakers, that's for everybody. How many quarterbacks come into the league and succeed without playmakers around them, right? Joe Burrow came into the league, got hurt, but the very next year, they went out and got Jamar Chase. Kirk Cousins, a resurgence in his career when they drafted Justin Jefferson. These things happen. We saw what Brady was able to do when he left New England his last year, and then immediately go over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Weapons are needed. The Houston Texans will address the wide receiver position in this year's draft, but I also love the fact that in the offseason, they went out and got Dalton Schultz, who will be a quarterback's best friend as a safety security blanket. I'm not worried about CJ Stroud down the line. There may be some concern now as a rookie, but this team will invest into their quarterback. Our head coach here has said multiple times, they have to get guys who can make plays when the pocket breaks down, or some guys that can go get it over the top. That's been their outline throughout the entire offseason, was building a team. I don't have doubt, and I have nothing but faith that they will continue to do so.
I do know we were talking about this before we got on. We have a time-coded stamp that you called that the Texans were going to trade up. Now, they did just that. Did you anticipate that it was going to be for Will Anderson, part one of this question? And part two, how much of a difference maker is a guy like this on the defense?
I did. I 100% expected the player to be Will Anderson. So actually in my trade up scenario, it was Will Anderson at 2 and trading up for CJ Stroud at 3 with Arizona because they already have their quarterback. And so, but I did see this scenario happening. I did see this franchise as a franchise that sat through the Deshaun Watson, I'm not going to play, then have to wait out to trade him. The Davis Mills, 2 seasons of roller coaster ride between Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor, Jeff Driscoll, Kyle Allen. This was a franchise that needed to do one thing, of course, win games, put butts in the seats. And in order to do that, you got to make electric moves. You got to make electrifying moves. And this move was electrifying. Like, my body is still shaking with electricity from excitement. So part 2 to that question, getting a Will Anderson, I think he is a player that once he comes into the league, I want to see how he is used. Now, 2 days ago, Will Anderson talked about his conversation with head coach D'Amico Ryans, and he said they have some special ways that they're going to be able to move me around and use me. I don't anticipate him with his hand in the dirt majority of the time. I think that he is a special player who does a lot of things good. In order to get the greatness out of him, you got to allow each and every one of those good aspects to come out of his game. Not one thing great, but a lot of good things. And so that is what I'm expecting to see out of Will Anderson under D'Amico Ryans. Guys, I think the city of Houston should be shouting throughout the entire week on the Locked On Texans podcast. We will start the show with a prayer, like praying to God, the sports gods, that this team will make the right decision. And they did twice on draft night. Like, the great days are coming back, guys.
Well, it seems like there is a lot to look forward to. John, appreciate your insight. And for more on the Texans, you can always tune into the Locked On Texans podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day.